The branch seemed to freeze. Even the constant tapping of keyboards and the rustle of papers stopped. All eyes were on the tall figure who had just stepped forward. Linda turned, stunned, her brows lifting in disbelief. She had seen the man in movies, heard that unmistakable voice on TV, but never once imagined she would meet him here, at the First Pacific Bank of all places. Vin Diesel's gaze didn't waver. He fixed his eyes on Carl Jensen, the smug branch manager who had just tried to humiliate a 73-year-old woman for daring to ask about her own money. "Excuse me," Carl said again, trying to regain control, his voice higher now, a touch defensive. "This is none of your business, so—" Vin tilted his head slightly, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "She's a customer. That makes it everybody's business. You don't disrespect people because they're older. You don't disrespect people because they don't fit your idea of valuable. You think that's leadership." A murmur rippled through the line of customers. Some nodded quietly, others pulled out their phones, recording. Brittany, the teller, shifted uncomfortably, suddenly avoiding Linda's eyes. Carl tried to laugh it off. "Mr. Diesel, with all due respect, this is a bank, not a movie set. We follow policy here." Vin took one slow step closer, his presence filling the space. Policy doesn't mean cruelty. Policy doesn't mean humiliating someone who's asking for help. His tone sharpened. This woman was a teacher. She's probably taught more kids in this city than you've ever spoken to in your life. And you think she deserves to be treated like she's a problem. Linda blinked, her lips trembling, not from fear but from the weight of hearing someone, finally, speak up for her. Carl's smugness faltered. His eyes darted toward the crowd, realizing he had lost them. The room was no longer on his side. Vin turned slightly, his voice projecting for the entire room to hear. "Respect is free. Compassion is free. And if this bank can't give her that, maybe the people here need to think about who they are trusting with their money." A few customers clapped softly. One man in line muttered, "That's right." Another added, "About time somebody said it." Under the growing pressure, Carl cleared his throat and forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Of course, we'll review those charges for you. No problem at all." Vin's eyes stayed locked on him for a moment longer. Then he turned to Linda, his expression softening. "Don't let anyone make you feel small. You've earned better than that." Linda exhaled, her voice quiet but steady. Thank you so much." He gave her a reassuring nod. "Family takes care of family. And right now, your family." The bank erupted into quiet applause. Brittany lowered her eyes, ashamed. Carl stepped back, retreating to his office, his authority shattered. As the tension dissolved, Linda straightened her shoulders. For the first time that day, she felt seen. Vin let the silence stretch, his presence filling the space like a shadow. The bank had gone so quiet that the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed deafening. Every eye in the room was fixed on Carl Jensen, the man who only minutes ago had wielded his authority so casually. Now he looked cornered, his polished confidence cracking under the pressure. Vin's voice cut through the stillness, calm but carrying a dangerous edge. "You've got two options, Carl. Do the right thing, or keep proving to everyone here that you don't care about the people who built their lives around this bank. People like her." He gestured toward Linda. She stood straighter now, clutching her envelope less like a shield and more like proof of her dignity. For the first time since she stepped up to the counter, she didn't feel invisible. Carl's lips tightened. His eyes darted around the lobby, at the cameras in the corners, at the customers whispering, at the phone still recording near the front. He swallowed hard. "Mr. Diesel, with all due respect." Vin raised a hand again, silencing him effortlessly. His tone was steady, deliberate, like someone who wasn't bluffing. "Respect? You don't get to use that word until you show it. Right now, you're proving exactly what kind of leader you are, and it's not one anyone here trusts." A few customers clapped softly, emboldened. The young woman with the baby bounced her child gently and muttered, "He's right." The man in the work uniform nodded. The room was no longer Carl's. Brittany shifted nervously at her station. For the first time, she spoke with uncertainty in her voice. "Mr. Jensen, maybe we really should reverse those fees." Carl spun on her, his jaw tightening. Not another word, Brittany. But even as he snapped, he knew control was slipping through his fingers. Vin leaned closer to the counter, lowering his voice just enough for the words to sting. You know what I see, Carl? A man so used to power that he forgot what it means to serve. You're hiding behind a system, when what's right in front of you is simple. Fix a mistake. Own up to it. Give this woman, give all these people, the respect they deserve. Carl's throat tightened. His polished manager mask was gone. What replaced it was raw panic. He could feel the crowd's judgment pressing in, recording, remembering. Linda finally spoke, her voice clear though soft. All I wanted was an explanation. Not excuses. Not humiliation. Just the truth. Vin nodded to her, then turned back to Carl, his arms folding across his chest. So what's it going to be? Do you keep digging this hole? Or do you take responsibility? The room waited. Seconds stretched like minutes. Carl's breathing was shallow, his palms damp. Finally, with no way out, his voice cracked. Fine, we'll reverse the fees. Vin's gaze didn't waver. For her? Carl swallowed. For all of them. A ripple of approval moved through the crowd. Relief, vindication, even pride. People who had been silent when Linda was mocked now stood taller, knowing they weren't alone. Vin nodded once, decisive. Now apologize. Carl's jaw clenched. His pride screamed against the demand. But with a camera lens trained on him and the crowd waiting, he forced the words out. I apologize for the way this was handled. It was stiff, mechanical, but it was still more than Linda had expected. Vin turned to Linda, his voice gentle again. You hear that? Not enough, but it's a start. Linda's eyes shimmered. For the first time all afternoon, she smiled faintly. Vin turned back toward the watching crowd. Remember this moment. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small in a place that's supposed to serve you. That's your money, your life. You got every right to demand fairness. The room erupted into quiet applause. Even Brittany clapped nervously, as if trying to distance herself from Carl's cruelty. Carl retreated, face pale, disappearing into his office like a man who had been publicly unmasked. Carl exhaled shakily, his shoulders slumping as the weight of the moment finally hit him. The room's silence pressed in on him like a vice. He turned stiffly to Brittany, his voice low and broken. Fix it, he muttered. Brittany didn't hesitate. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, undoing the charges with frantic urgency. Each keystroke felt like a confession echoing through the room. Customers leaned forward, watching the numbers change on the glowing screen. Small victories appearing line by line. Vin let the silence linger. His presence filled the space like a shadow that refused to leave. The bank, usually a hum of chatter and tapping and shuffling feet, had gone utterly still. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed louder than Carl's shallow breathing. Then Vin spoke, his voice cutting through the air, calm but sharpened like steel. You've got two options, Carl. Do the right thing, or keep proving that you don't care about the people who built their lives around this place. People like her. He gestured toward Linda. She straightened. The envelope no longer clutched like armor but held as proof of her dignity. For the first time that day, she felt taller. Carl's lips pressed in. His eyes darted around. The cameras in the corners, the customers whispering, the phone still recording near the front of the line. He looked like a man realizing the ground beneath him was about to give way. Mr. Diesel, with all due respect. Vin lifted his hand, silencing him without effort. His words were deliberate, calm, but left no room for escape. Respect? You don't get to say that word until you show it. Right now, you're proving what kind of leader you are, and no one here trusts that kind. A quiet clap echoed from the back. Then another. A young woman with a baby shifted the child on her hip and murmured, "His right." The man in the work uniform nodded firmly. The crowd was no longer Carl's audience. Brittany cleared her throat, her voice trembling. "Mr. Jensen, maybe we really should reverse those fees." Carl spun on her, jaw clenched, anger rising. "Not another word, Brittany." But even as he snapped, he knew control was slipping through his fingers like sand. Vin leaned against the counter, lowering his voice so the sting landed harder. "You know what I see, Carl? A man so addicted to power he forgot what it means to serve. Hiding behind systems, excuses, numbers. But what's right here in front of you? It's simple. Fix it. Own it. Give this woman, give all these people the respect they deserve. Carl's polished mask had shattered. Sweat glistened at his temple. His throat tightened as a crowd pressing on him with their eyes, their judgment, their phones recording. Linda spoke then, softly but steady. All I wanted was an explanation. Not humiliation, just the truth. Vin turned to her, nodding, then looked back at Carl. His arms folded across his chest, his presence like a wall. So, what's it going to be? Keep digging? Or take responsibility? Seconds stretched painfully. Carl's breathing came uneven. Finally, his voice cracked, all defiance gone. Fine, we'll reverse the fees. Vin's gaze didn't soften. For her? Carl swallowed. For all of them. A ripple went through the room. Relief, vindication, pride. The same customers who had stood silent when Linda was mocked now lifted their heads, no longer invisible. Vin gave a single decisive nod. Now apologize. Carl's jaw clenched. His pride screamed, but the camera lens staring at him left no escape. He forced the words out. I apologize for the way this was handled. It was mechanical, stiff, but for Linda, it was still more than she ever thought she'd hear. Vin turned to her, his voice gentle again. You hear that? Not enough, but it's a start. Her eyes shimmered. She smiled faintly, gratitude softening the years in her face. Vin pivoted back to the crowd, his voice carrying like a verdict. Remember this. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small in a place that's supposed to serve you. That's your money, your life. You have every right to demand fairness. The applause started small, then grew, filling the lobby. Brittany clapped nervously, distancing herself from Carl's cruelty. Even the security guard at the door nodded, arms folded, lips pressed into a rare smile. Carl slunk away toward his office, face pale, steps heavy, like a man who had been stripped of his armor. And Linda Carter, who had walked in that afternoon feeling invisible, left with her head high, her dignity restored, her voice finally heard. Linda stepped out of the bank's glass doors and into the late Los Angeles afternoon. The sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows across Wilshire Boulevard. She paused on the sidewalk, clutching the envelope against her chest, breathing deeply as if trying to release the tension still lingering in her chest. For a moment she just stood there, the roar of traffic and the chatter of passers-by rushing around her. But inside, she felt oddly still. The humiliation she had endured was still raw, but so was the unexpected power of what had followed. She had come in small. She was leaving tall. Vin followed her out, tugging his cap back over his head to shield himself from the recognition that was already starting to ripple through the crowd of onlookers inside. A couple of customers hurried out after them, thanking him, shaking his hand, murmuring their gratitude. But Vin kept his focus on Linda. You all right? He asked quietly. Linda blinked at him, her voice soft. I don't even know what to say. Nobody's ever stood up for me like that. Not in a long time. Vin gave her a faint smile, gentle but firm. Don't thank me. You deserved it. You've been carrying yourself with dignity your whole life. Sometimes it just takes one moment, one voice, to remind people that they matter. Linda's lips trembled. She wanted to cry, but instead, she laughed softly. You sound just like in your movies. Vin chuckled, shaking his head. Movies don't mean much unless you live by the words. Before Linda could reply, a young man approached, still holding his phone. He was one of the customers from the line, the one who had been recording. His eyes darted nervously between Vin and Linda. Excuse me, Mr. Diesel. I recorded the whole thing. I was going to put it online. Do you want me to stop? Vin studied him for a moment. He could see the uncertainty, the eagerness, and the hunger for validation in the young man's eyes. You post it if you think it'll help, Vin said calmly. But make sure it's about her. He gestured to Linda, not about me. She's a story. Not me. The young man nodded quickly. Yes, sir. I understand. Linda's cheeks colored. Oh, I don't want to cause trouble. Vin looked at her, steady and unshaken. Sometimes, trouble's the only way people start listening. Part 3. Corporate Awakens. That evening, while Linda made herself a quiet dinner in her small apartment in Mid-City, the video began spreading. First on TikTok, then on Instagram, then Twitter. By midnight it had crossed over to Facebook, where hundreds of thousands of people, many of them retirees and working-class customers, shared it with captions like, "Finally, someone stood up for us. Banks nickel and diming us for decades. Enough is enough." Vin Diesel defending a grandma in a bank is the movie I didn't know I needed. By morning, it had hit the news cycle. Local stations replayed the shaky footage of Vin standing in the bank, calmly but firmly dismantling Carl Jensen. National networks picked it up by noon. Hashtag began to trend. Banking scam. Respect our elders. Vin Diesel for president. Inside First Pacific's corporate headquarters downtown, the mood was chaos. Boardroom meetings filled with panicked executives. Spreadsheets of fee structures pulled up, reviewed, and re-reviewed. Crisis managers argued about strategy. We'll issue a statement. Say it was an isolated incident. No, the video shows multiple customers agreeing it happened to them. We can't let this blow up any further. Jensen's finished. We have to cut him loose. By the end of the day, Carl Jensen's name was trending alongside the bank's. His face, sweating, red, humiliated, was frozen in millions of paused screens across the internet. Part 4. The Unexpected Call. 2 days later, Linda's phone rang. She almost didn't answer. She rarely picked up unknown numbers. But something in her told her to. "Mrs. Carter," a polished female voice said. "This is Patricia Hayes. I'm the regional vice president of First Pacific Bank. I'd like to personally apologize for what happened to you." Linda hesitated. She wasn't used to being on the receiving end of apologies from people in power. Patricia's voice continued smoothly. "We're reviewing all accounts affected by these fees. You will be receiving a full reimbursement. And, if you're willing, we'd like to feature you in our customer council to help us improve how we serve seniors and retirees." Linda was stunned into silence. She couldn't tell if this was genuine or damage control. Maybe both. I'll think about it," she said finally. When she hung up, she sat in her small kitchen, staring at the phone. For the first time in years, she felt something she thought she had lost long ago: power. Part 5. Back to Vin. Meanwhile, Vin had returned to his world. Film sets, interviews, workouts, the endless carousel of celebrity life. But the bank incident followed him everywhere. Interviewers asked. Fans cheered. Memes exploded. His agent joked, "You just became the face of anti-bank activism, Vin." But Vin wasn't laughing. He couldn't shake Linda's face from his mind, the look of someone who had been dismissed for years, finally given a voice. Late one night, after a press event, he sat alone in his trailer scrolling through the endless reposts of the video. For once, he didn't care about the spotlight. He cared about the people commenting underneath. Thousands of them, sharing their own stories of unfair fees, cold treatment, humiliation. This wasn't just Linda's fight. It was everyone's. And Vin Diesel, unexpectedly, unwillingly, was now right in the middle of it. The morning after the video went viral, Linda woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing endlessly on the nightstand. At first she thought it was a mistake, maybe a robocle. But when she put on her glasses and squinted at the screen, she saw dozens of unread text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. Some were neighbors, some were former colleagues, and some were complete strangers who had somehow found her number. They all said variations of the same thing. "We saw you on the news. We're proud of you. We've been there too." For years she had felt invisible, a retired school teacher tucked away in a modest apartment, her world shrinking bit by bit with age. Now suddenly, she was a voice, an unintentional symbol for everyone who had ever been dismissed by people in power. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea cooling in her hands, scrolling through messages, her mind a swirl of disbelief. She had never asked for this, never expected her quiet fight at a bank counter to ripple into something larger. And yet here it was, spreading like wildfire. She thought back to Vin Diesel's steady words, the way he had stood beside her without hesitation. She had seen strength before, on screens, in books, but never so close, never turned in her defense. It had lit something inside her she didn't even realize was still alive, a fire that told her she wasn't finished yet. Across the city, Vin was sitting in a studio chair while a makeup artist dabbed at his forehead before an interview. The host was supposed to ask about his latest movie, but Vin could already see the note cards in her hand. She was going to bring up the bank. His publicist had warned him not to dwell on it, to keep the focus on his career. But Vin couldn't shake the image of Linda clutching her envelope, her voice shaking yet determined. He had stepped in that day on instinct, but now it was following him. Every time he scrolled through his phone, he saw not just Linda's face but the thousands of comments underneath. Stories of retirees losing money they couldn't spare, parents overdrafted by hidden fees, students buried under charges they never agreed to. The more he read, the angrier he became. The interview began as expected, but when the question finally came, Vin, you've gone viral for defending a woman at a bank. What made you step in? He didn't answer with a polished line. He leaned forward, his deep voice measured and raw. Because respect is free. That's it. Respect is free. If you're in a position of power, if you're behind a counter or sitting in an office, you don't get to treat people like they don't matter. That woman mattered. Every single one of us matters. His words weren't rehearsed, but they struck with the same force as they had in the bank lobby. The clip aired that night and spread just as fast as the original video. Meanwhile, inside First Pacific's corporate headquarters, panic had become procedure. The boardroom was filled with executives in tailored suits, faces tense as they dissected the fallout. Charts of stock dips, projections of customer losses, emails from furious account holders. It was all piling up. One executive suggested firing Carl immediately and releasing a statement. Another argued that it would look like scapegoating. A third quietly admitted what none of them wanted to say aloud. This isn't just one branch. We've been raising fees across the board, especially on accounts with lower balances. If the public realizes this, it won't just be one video. It'll be a scandal. Carl himself sat in his office that morning with the blinds drawn, his career unraveling in real time. His phone buzzed with calls from corporate, from reporters, from angry customers, but he couldn't bring himself to answer. The proud, polished manager who had once believed himself untouchable now looked in the mirror and saw a man who had been dismantled in front of the entire country. His name was out there, his reputation scorched. He thought about the way Vin Diesel had looked at him, steady and unflinching, and for the first time Carl Jensen felt something he had never truly felt before: shame. Back in her apartment, Linda received another call, this one from a local journalist who wanted to feature her in a story about CNAs and banking practices. At first, she hesitated. She wasn't used to microphones or cameras. But then she remembered all the messages she'd read that morning from strangers who said, "You spoke for us." Maybe she hadn't asked for this role, but maybe she couldn't ignore it either. So she said yes. That afternoon, a reporter sat across from her at her kitchen table, recording her words as she recounted what had happened. For the first time in years, her voice carried beyond the four walls of her small home. Vin saw the interview that evening on the local news while he was on set. Linda sat at her table, her hands folded, her voice calm but firm as she said, "I don't want special treatment. I just want fairness. People my age, people who worked all their lives, shouldn't have to fight for the right to keep the little we have." Something about the quiet power in her words struck him more deeply than the loudest applause he'd ever gotten in his career. And so, without fully realizing it, Vin Diesel began to step into a role he had never sought. Not just an actor, not just a celebrity, but a voice against injustice that reached far beyond the silver screen. Linda Carter, the retired schoolteacher who only wanted an explanation, found herself at the center of a storm much larger than her. And the bank, once a place of silent transactions and ignored complaints, was about to become the battleground for a fight that neither of them could have predicted.